Okay, welcome to the live stream today, and it is all kicking off, ladies and gents. It is kicking off big time today. We've got a lot to cover. We'll begin with the biggest story of the day, which is around the new front that's opened up in the Middle East. This is Israel again, not with Iran, not with any other nations or some of the proxy groups. Now it's with Syria. So I'm going to break that down because I was quite surprised watching the sort of mainstream media on this, and I don't know where they're getting their information from, but some of the stuff they're talking about is completely inaccurate, and they're talking about everything that's going on. The biggest breakthrough that's just happened around this was they've just bombed the Syrian army headquarters in Damascus. So we'll get into a little bit of this. We'll go over some of the stories here. Also, Germany have just done a shocking thing. They've just been, we've got to go through all these stories. There's so much going on. US weapons for Ukraine. There's a lot to catch you up on. We've got Russia, China, North Korea, Japan's just put out a new report. Loads to cover today, so let's get into it. Let's get the shared going. Here we go. So Israel's just hit the Syrian army headquarters, and they've also struck near the palace in Damascus. Now, I was going through the sort of media around this as to, and actually I'll tell you about this in a second. So I was going through the media around this because I thought, what is going on here? And the media was saying that Israel striking in Syria because they're trying to protect this very small ethnic group in the region. And as soon as I heard that and I saw it repeated the same words across everything, I said, it doesn't really make sense, but okay, let me look into it. So they're called the Druze people, and I'll tell you about them in a second. They're quite a small secular group. So that is the sort of narrative around it, why all this bomb, and it's 160 targets and counting, and I don't buy it at all. First of all, it doesn't make sense that Israel would be protecting this very small group of people here. That why would they do that? It doesn't really make any sense to me. What does make sense is the broader picture. And that is, if I were in their position, what would I want to do? I would always be looking for these opportunities, like this conflict that's going on at the moment. I'd be looking for an opportunity to then strike and weaken my enemies. And I think that is the reality of what's going on. Not all these stories about Israel is trying to defend this small ethnic group from sort of this guerrilla warfare that's going on in Syria. It doesn't make sense. It sounds good. It sounds really nice, but I think the reality is that they're probably trying to weaken these proxy groups that have been attacking Israel. And there's a lot going on in the region. I won't get into all the nitty-gritty of it, but that makes more sense to me. Drop in the comments what you think to that. But let me tell you about this group then. And also, the US, this was the other thing, even last night, the US asked Israel to stop the strikes on the Syrian military forces in Syria. And there was a big statement of what they said, but they basically said they don't understand why Israel is bombing these locations. They asked them to cease the bombing campaign, and that was it. But Israel said that they weren't going. Actually, Israel said they would stop the campaign, but then within hours they started the campaign again. So I don't know what President Trump thinks about this, but we'll find out. So let me just tell you about these Druze people then. They are a very small group that originated in the Middle East. They're often confused with being Muslim. They're not Muslim. They are a sort of smaller sect. They broke away a long time ago. They are, it says they don't follow Islam. They're Gnostic, Neoplatonic, and other philosophical elements. They are spread between two countries, and that is Syria and Israel. There's about 1 million of them. Most of them are in Syria, and then there's 100,000 or so in Israel. So that's the background to it. Again, it's bizarre to me, this whole sort of narrative around it, but I'm open to your perspective if you want to share. So what is this strategy then? It says Israel is protecting this group because they want to make sure that there aren't any human rights violations against them in the region, and they are bombing the military sites. Here we go. So we've got the statement out of the Israeli military. They are bombing the Syrian army HQs and military infrastructure because they want to protect this small group. Again, it doesn't make any sense. It doesn't make sense. What makes sense is weakening the proxy groups in the region. So that is this kind of first background to it before we go on to the other stories. But I want to know your thoughts on this, because I'd be very interested to read what each of you think about this. So let's go on to then the next one. So we're going to talk about the US weapons package for Ukraine, because it seems to have just disappeared out of the media. They were talking about it on Monday quite heavily, and then it sort of disappeared. So I've done some follow-up work to see exactly what is going to be sent. So we can look at that now. We've got that information. Just a reminder as well, I've started the summer sale, so you can look at that in the description below for all the courses and other programs. So have a look at that below. Now, let's see then. This is out of Euronews. This is the new weapons package for Ukraine. So what are they going to get and who's going to pay for it? Well, the big one is Patriot batteries. NATO Secretary General Mark Rutte, he's been working with the European countries to coordinate the purchase of US weapons. This is Germany, Finland, Canada, Norway, Sweden, the United Kingdom, and Denmark would be among the buyers to supply Ukraine. He also said speed is of the essence here. Well, first thing, it's quite interesting when you look at these countries that are supplying it. These countries are broke. They're broke. This is exactly what I was talking about on Monday. It's a repeat of World War II. These countries in Europe went completely broke, creating more currency, more debt. It's funny how they don't call it debt. They say defense spending packages and stimulus, and they use all these words, but basically it's debt. And that's what I find amusing, that they're building up all of this debt, huge levels of debt, and they're saying that this is positive for GDP, gross domestic product. Yeah, in the short term. But remember, you've got to pay all that back, all that debt back later. You know, imagine this is your, and we'll link it back to the US as well here, but imagine this is your household budget, and you've got, 1x. Okay, so you, your partner, family, whatever, you've got 1x. That's your household budget. But your outgoings are 5x, right? Some of these countries, we could say 10x. What would you do? I mean, this isn't a trick question. What would you do if your spending was like 2x, 5x, but your income was 1x? It's obvious. You would cut back your spending. That is the simplicity of this. This is the simplicity of economics. No, these countries say, we're going to ramp up the debt, and we're going to, buy all these weapon systems. Even though we're in massive debt and we can't afford weapon systems for ourselves, we're going to buy them all for Ukraine. Now, the other background to this is, it's really more of a proxy. This is my view. You're completely open to your own views on this, but this is my view, that the Western European governments don't want to fight a war with Russia because they know they can't win. They're not ready. Although I say that loosely. If US and some of the other big ones were involved, then they could. But I say this loosely. They don't want to have this big war with Russia. So what are they doing? They're using Ukraine and the men of Ukraine as their proxy. So they're sending money and weapons so that Europe doesn't have to fight itself. That's my view. Please let me know what your view is on this. Hopefully I'm not saying anything too controversial today, trying to tone it down a little bit in recent weeks. So that's the first point here. We're determined to assume greater responsibility for Europe's deterrence, he said. The German government offered to finance 2, not just 1, 2 Patriot systems at a staggering amount of money. In addition to Germany, Greece and Spain said that they have spare Patriots to send to Ukraine as well, as long as they are eventually replaced. Good luck getting them replaced, and that's all I'll say. President Trump revealed Ukraine would be receiving a total of 17 systems. So this is fresh, what's come out here. It's everything, he said. It's Patriots, it's all of them. It's a full complement with the batteries. He said 17 are ready to be shipped. So they're ready to be shipped very quickly. Also, Tomahawk missiles. I was surprised President Trump has approved this, but okay. I don't know whether this is about making a statement or whether this is financial or whether this is to sort of push Putin into coming to the negotiating table, although Putin says, I'm at the negotiating table. It's Ukraine that doesn't want to negotiate. It's so blurred, and the information now is very difficult, even for me. You know, when I sit there and I'm reading all these statements, even for me, it's difficult to try and see these blurred lines now. Let's carry on with this. So these Tomahawks are long range. So I wonder if this is financial, because the US will be making a fortune on these $1 million missiles. I thought it was interesting they talked about how that Ukraine could use them to carry a nuclear payload. No, they won't. That is ridiculous. No one's going to give Ukraine nuclear weapons. That would definitely start WW3. Tomahawk missiles were used against targets in Iran last month, and if provided to Ukraine, they could reach deep into Russian territory. So, yes, I think that would only escalate things. Now, Russia isn't really sounding rattled by these ultimatums that have come out. They haven't really shown much indication of, caving into any pressure here. So we've got a couple of statements then. This was from the Kremlin spokesman. He called Mr. Trump, they always say Mr. Trump. I find that weird how they use this Mr. Trump. The Guardian says that as well. But anyway, back to this. They said the remarks were very serious on Tuesday and something that would concern Putin, but he said Moscow would need time to analyze the position. He said he hoped the United States were still pressuring Ukraine to continue peace talks. So again, here's that statement again. Russia, whether this is just misdirection or not, they say they're at the negotiating table, but Ukraine isn't. And if you actually look a little bit deeper into this, I'm probably not giving you the full context. So when I was reading all the statements on it, they were actually saying that Ukraine isn't at the negotiating table because the concessions that Russia is asking for are too great. So that's why, I should probably give you that context so it didn't seem biased there, but that's why they're saying they're not at the negotiating table. And if you think about that, why would that be? Well, it's obvious. Even the propaganda that we've been seeing has been dropped now, which was that Ukraine was winning the war. You kept seeing this. Ukraine is winning the war and it's going to beat Russia. And anybody who had half a brain could see that that would never be possible. This little country versus this huge country that has always been a military powerhouse. So we all knew that that would never happen. But of course, that was the rhetoric and everyone sort of bought into it. But the concessions are too great, I feel. That's why, and Russia's winning, so why would they come to the negotiating table and accept terms that they don't want to accept? Unless someone like the US or NATO entered the conflict, then I think we'd see a bit of a different story here. We also had this. They said time is on Russia's side because Ukraine has lost territory and they're struggling to find enough men and Western support. Moscow wants to understand what's behind President Trump's threat to impose very severe tariffs within 50 days. It used to be 24 hours, he said. It used to be 100 days. We've been going through all of this, and we really want to understand what motivates the President of the United States. Well, I would say read his book, The Art of the Deal, and you'll understand then what motivates President Trump. And it's quite interesting. China has vowed deeper support for Russia after the President Trump threat then. He said the US president warned Putin to sign a peace deal or face high tariffs on trading partners. I don't see Putin signing this peace deal anytime soon, but let me know what you think. I mean, he's already been through these tough sanctions with SWIFT and everything else, and they are building up their alternative currency system within the BRICS framework. They're already building this bridge, if you know what I'm talking about, the digital currency. They're already testing it. They're already trading with their local currencies. They're already building huge stockpiles. I think the only thing that would really push Russia and Putin into this sort of where they feel threatened would be military, so NATO military, indirect warfare. I just don't see anything apart from that really causing that sort of a concern for them. But please drop in the comments below what you think. China has vowed to deepen its support for Russia. This was after President Trump threatened to impose tariffs on Moscow's trading partners, so that would be on China. Xi Jinping has said Beijing and Moscow should strengthen their mutual support on multilateral forums. He added that trust between China and Russia had deepened, and the two states were setting a model for a new type of international relations. This is partly the BRICS framework, but there's also other agreements behind the scenes. Now, there was a couple of other things. Here we go. He also announced plans to sell these billions. Okay, this is the key thing here. It's billions of dollars of weapons. It's not millions, which is why I think this could be a financial sort of move for President Trump in the US, as opposed to the sort of other angle we talked about here. It's the UK, France, and Germany who are buying them, the most indebted countries, of course. Now, there was a report that, I don't usually quote CNN here, but this came out of CNN. There was a report out of Japan that they fear China, North Korea, and Russia being the biggest security threat now since World War II. And they said Beijing is rapidly enhancing its military capability in a qualitative and quantitative manner while intensifying activities around the region. I'll tell you one thing I thought was quite shocking that took place. We talked about the exercise on Monday in Australia. Well, the US was brazen enough to fire this very serious missile, is what I would call, right very close to the Chinese fleet. And China didn't respond or intercept it or anything like that. But you better believe they were furious, and they called on the ambassador and all the other stuff. And the US used that missile to sink a big ship just to show that they could do it. And I just thought that was quite interesting, because imagine if China was doing some sort of war game with Mexico and they launched that. The US would have gone crazy. But of course, it's in Australia. And at the same time, this was the other thing that was really, I haven't got the article, but at the exact same time, the Australian Prime Minister, when this rocket was launched, was meeting the Chinese government to talk about cooperation and mutual bilateral trade and all this other stuff. Can you imagine sitting there when that report comes, you know, a little whisper in the ear, the US just fired this massive missile and Australia allowed it, and it's right by our fleet. I just can't imagine that at all. There was one other thing then. Germany the EU has just approved this massive spending plan for Germany. It's so mind-boggling that the GDP is going to rise to 74%. Debt to GDP is going to rise to 74%. Germany is in big trouble. I don't mind saying that. it is in really, really big trouble. They just don't know it yet. You can't spend your way out of a debt crisis. You can't spend your way out of higher energy costs and some of the other things they've got now. It's not looking good for Germany at all. But they're buying all these weapons and they're sending them here, there, and everywhere. But they somehow think that by becoming this big military powerhouse, it's going to save their economy. It's not. It's not. Thanks for watching today, ladies and gents. Check out the summer sale. Apart from that, take care. God bless. See you next time.